basically Kunal is saying he has a bunch of skills, firmware development and IoT and all that. And he knows that startups are looking for non-permanent employees. So he's first question is he's confused whether to join a regular job or join a startup which is building something unique. Second is if he wants to build a startup himself, can he build a startup just with the skills and not necessarily some new groundbreaking idea, right? So I'll let you answer that. Yeah.
Right. See, to address the first question, it depends on where you want to be. In the sense that, see, nothing stops you from doing both.
Maldives, there's a bit of disturbance from your mic. You can keep it a little away. Yeah, I think it's audible. Yeah,
it's
thank you.
audible. Yeah.
Yes, please. No, it's fine.
Yeah. Right. So, again, nothing prevents you from doing both. In the sense that, uh, see, if you want to be a freelancer, because I personally do freelancing and consulting as a service as well, right? In the sense, nothing prevents you from taking up a job and doing this on your side or on your weekends or whatnot. Nothing prevents you from doing that. So if you are wanting to say that, okay, let's say I want to have a steady income and want to explore freelancing on the side, you are totally free to do that on your end. There is nobody is going to stop you from doing that at all. So it depends on, see, if you are looking at freelancing as a career, you need to build up your profile in the sense that either startup, in the sense you need to have some sort of brand image wherein people start taking you seriously. So how you do that is basically you start freelancing for free. And because you're early on in your path as an engineer, you can actually take up that route. In the sense, you try to volunteer for services. So let's say there is a company which is wanting something done, let's say firmware design or some sort of hardware design, let's say, right? You reach out to them and say, okay, hey, I would like to build this for you for free. So what that will help enable you is, it helps you uh, one, understand how that entire ecosystem is, gain more knowledge, and it will help create your brand and networks. And also what it will help enable you to do is, you will get to know this entire cycle. In the sense, like, okay, since you're on the, so you might not have had an entire product development cycle per se. In the sense, you might have done a project wherein you are doing some firmware development. What is the so it doesn't end there. So let's say if I'm designing a hardware product, so one is the firmware, right? Now, so now let's say if that product is going out into the market. Now let's say there are thousands of these devices which I'm going to push it out into your market, right? Now how would I uh, do a test casing in the production line? So let's say I am developing, so this is one of the boards which I did. In the sense, I am developing something which I'm trying to program into a controller onto this, right? Onto, let's say, a device. Now how do I test on a production scale at when it is done, production is done at a factory level? So there are testing softwares, testing codes. So there are n number of cycles which also needs to come in. So first you start off by learning those. So then what it enables you to do is, you build up your, it's like building up your resume. You build up your project list saying, oh, I have worked in XYZ technology, I have worked in ABC technology as well. So now you say that, okay, now I have kind of a domain expertise in, let's say, firmware. Okay, now let's say I want to start, take up PCB design as, I'm just giving this as an example. In the sense, I want to develop PCB skills as an example, and I want to be good at it. So you start freelancing for just for free. If it is not something which you are trying to take up immediately as a thing. So once you build your career track, and once people start recognizing you and seeing you that, okay, you have done these great projects, then they will say, okay, hey, now you can start charging them, saying, okay, hey, my hourly rate is this, or my project rate is this, for me to get going and finish your project. So that is that. In the sense that, so coming to the second part of your question, in the sense, if you are trying to say that, uh, you is it possible for you to create freelancing as a business opportunity? That is very well possible. So in the sense, if you don't have an idea and you want to be in the enabler domain, that is also possible. But the competition is slightly tough there because there are quite a lot of design studios already out there who do end-to-end product development, in the sense that there are like, so let's say I want to build a smartwatch, right? Okay, there are companies who have the skill sets, who will take, say, okay, from this ideation to building the hardware, building the firmware, building the software stack, putting it to production, doing the injection molding and mass manufacture of it, and giving you the end product. So there are companies already in that loop. So again, you are competing with them. So you need to find your own unique value proposition on how is it that you are going to differentiate yourself from the rest of the community. So if you are able to do that, then you will be able to launch a freelance venture on, like, as a business as such.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that answer, Amaldev. And I would like to also add to that, that saying that, in the startup world, mostly, students and other people are not familiar, think idea is everything. But we in the startup world know it's execution.
Yeah.
You need the skills to build. It's not the idea. In fact, you can build on a similar idea like somebody has built in China or even India itself, right? Or even in the US. You can build the same thing. But if you're able to execute it well, that is where you succeed. Success is not from idea, right? Yeah.
Idea was worth nothing in
Idea
this.
is worth nothing unless you execute, right? Yeah. Just wanted to add that, because many people think it's all about the idea in the startup world.
Looking at the student community who is here, they should also understand that especially on the medical electronic side, there are enormous amount of rules and regulations governing this. And
Yes.
students are not aware that even if you build a simple thing like a digital thermometer, there are 100 regulations that have to be,
Right.
achieved. You can't just say I built the most incredible thermometer in the world.
Right.
And it doesn't meet the FDA norms or the Central Drug and Research Institute norms, everything.
Right.
So which and then the practical situation, how do you read it? How is a common man using it? If you're giving it, if you're building a small thermometer, the person using it will be just a nurse. So it's no use making it too complicated, too many programs. At the same time, simple, easy to use, rugged, all that also comes in. Which, as a student, who are part of this group now, I'm addressing that we have seen that. When you go for project competitions, I've seen students say, I've designed this, I've designed that. I said, look, will it meet these regulations? No, we are not even aware that such a, regulation exists.
That is an excellent point, in the sense, see, if you look at product development, once you reach a POC and you have some product which is kind of ready to go to market, then is what your testing phase is going to start. That is kind of one expensive, and it is very cumbersome. So see, the companies like sir was mentioning, GEs and all those, they have entire divisions working on just making sure your product is going through regulatory and testing approvals. Because I know that, like, when I was doing my first startup, uh, I didn't know much about this. I knew that, okay, I needed to do this. I didn't know how hard it was. So there were days when we were, so there is something known as EMCMI compliance testing and all that, wherein so let's say you are building a product. So let's say you're building a product A versus product B, and product A should not, let's say, interfere with the working of product B, right? So like wireless interference or something of that order, it should not be there. So there were cases wherein our device initially was failing. So I remember going to testing. So these testings usually happen in testing labs. So there are quite a few testing labs out there in the country. TUE, UL, all those guys are there, and they charge a bomb for it. I mean, like, it's heavily expensive. To give you a sense, these guys charge you anywhere from like 1 lakh for an 8-hour slot a day for test, using their test equipments. To it is just a huge chamber wherein you are trying to test for different parameters of your device, and they charge close to like 1 lakh for an 8-hour slot. And this was like 3-4 years ago. And this would be this is something which a startup cannot fathom for, and they don't look at this. If I, again, when I work with companies and startups, this is a major thing which I say, They never account for this in the budgeting, in the sense that, okay, hey, I have done a POC, now let me go and make hundreds of these to mass manufacture. No, where is your testing certificate? Is it certified even to go out into in the market yet? Do you have your regulatory approvals done? So that in itself is a whole new ball game. So that if we, even in that, it will take like an hours. So there are companies who take like day long lectures just to explain to you what are the compliance and regulatory aspects. So yeah, as sir was mentioning, it is a very important point, especially in healthcare, especially in, let's say, hardware tech. So this is not really a case in software, but yeah, I think regulations are kind of catching up there, like HIPAA compliance and all that, because if you're dealing with patient data, medical standards and all that is getting there. But yeah, so that is why people, so when I talk to people, I try to tell them hardware is extremely hard to crack. So if you are trying to build an hardware oriented business, it is extremely hard to build, scale and sustain. So but there is fun to it. To give you an example, when we made our first product, when we stuck the first logo, like on the product you place a label and logo, right? So when we printed the first logo and it was like made in India and we stuck it on there, that proud feeling was there. That cannot come with a software product, to be honest.
I completely understand that, and especially if you accomplish a difficult thing, right? You overcome many obstacles and all that. There is a lot of pride associated with that too, right? Because you come out successful on the other side.
Right.
So that is great. So then could you then speak about all the made in India things that probably how, okay, let me rephrase that better. So is it realistic then, if you're creating hardware products, to be only restricted to make in India, or is it a wise decision to just go and try to get it done anywhere around the world, whatever it takes, like, so that your quality is met, your budget is met and all that?
Again, that's always a business call, right? In the sense that, see, I'm an advocate to saying, okay, good that make in India and campaign is all that and all that, but if you can't get services done to match your business requirements in India, go anywhere else on planet. There are enough services available across the globe to get things done. So do not look yourself and restrict yourself to the fact that you need to make in India, but there is certain advantages to it. So I'll speak on that as well, in the sense that if you are doing purely a make in India sort of a thing, wherein your manufacturer is right next door, in the sense like a city away, if there is an issue in the production line, or if there is something which need fixing from your end, you can directly take a cab, train, flight, whatever, reach there next day to help fix that. So this is not possible if you are doing product, let's say product design happens in India and you are outsourcing manufacturing to China, Taiwan, or wherever. This just won't happen unless you are relocating yourself or your engineering team stationed there for a couple of months, during which the production is happening. Unless that happens, there is always an accessibility challenge which is always there, and there is communication issues. There are enough number of headaches associated with it. But if it makes sense from the business point of view, saying, okay, if I am making the product here in India and it's going to cost me X, and the value add I'm getting is like Y, and if I'm doing it in China, I'm getting ABC value adds and my price is this, what is it that going to make my business like business more fruitful? I will pick that as an option. That is basically, you don't think twice about it. You say, okay, make in India is there. Yeah, once the manufacturing comes to its par to what I need, I'll do manufacturing here in India. Else, I'll take it abroad. That is totally okay. So whatever makes sense for you, and because it is very hard to sustain in hardware. The margins are very small. So you need to try to eke out profit in your product. So even if so one rule of thumb which I try to do is, so whatever is, let's say, your BOM cost, like your bill of materials cost, you ideally try to price it like 2.5 to 3x on the bare minimum for you to even sustain as a company. Yeah. So people who are not into this domain would say, oh, that is a very large margin. No, that is not. That is just enough for you to sustain and run a business, because you need to maintain inventories. You need, so it's not like an app download which can happen and you can scale infinitely. It's not like that. You, so let's say I want to make 100 of a unit, 1,000 of a unit, and 1 lakh of a unit. All have different set of rules you need to adhere by. So the manufacturing practices change, the testing practices change for each of these segments. So if I need to make 100 of this, okay, maybe rapid prototyping with some finishing will work. So if I need to make 100, I mean, if I need 1,000, 10,000, then I might need to do some sort of like injection molding. So if there's plastic parts or something, I need to do injection molding. If it is 1 lakh or more, I need to look at redesigning the product for, so even if let's say from the electronic terms, even if I have to, let's say, reduce the part of a resistor in my, so which will be like 1 rupee or 2 rupee, that multiplied by 1 lakh, 2 lakh, that will add to a large BOM cost in my entire design. So it is finally a actual point saying, okay, you make, if it makes business sense for you, you do that. That's basically it.
I see, I see. And that's what many people around the world also seem to be doing, many businesses, right? Like they source materials and parts and manufacturing from various other countries, and they're able to rapidly produce products and stuff like that. So
Right.
that is yeah. So it seems like rapidly to develop a hardware product is a bit of a challenge. So do you have any comments about like 3D printers and helping rapidly manufacture things in India? So if we had like a vast 3D printer, a set of 3D printers, would we able to quickly manufacture a lot of these products? What do you think?
So this is not specifically regarding 3D printers. So 3D printer is one form of rapid prototyping tool, basically. But again, it needs to make sense for you. So if you are making 100 of them, then and you are not that price conscious, in the sense that, so let's take an example of some exotic product which you are trying to do, and your market size is very small, but you can charge whatever is the price points, because the users are, it's solving a major pain point to a user, and you price it like 10x or 20x. You don't care about the price of the actual BOM cost. In those cases, 3D printing might make sense, but it can't scale. In the sense, it will hit a limit because there is time associated with it. There is a quality finish aspects to it. So it will help you create something faster, but you will always reach a peak. Saying, okay, till this volume production, this is okay. Beyond this, yeah, I need to switch to the next manufacturing service. So
I
rapid
see.
prototyping always works till a point. So how I would use rapid prototyping is like, okay, if you are getting, for me that street number is 100. So if I'm doing my first production run or first manufacturing run of proof of concept, which I need to give off these devices to, let's say, end consumers for feedback, I'll use rapid prototyping. So once I get more feedback, I refine my design. Then I say, okay, I need to make 10,000. Yeah, I'll switch to the next mode of manufacturing.
I see. So there are a lot of these kind of little decisions one needs to make, which has a lot
Right.
of cascading kind of effects, right? Uh, so maybe one of the things you could quickly probably address, if possible, is what is the role of then capital in wanting to develop hardware products, right? Because it seems like you really need to figure out your budgets and stuff before you go ahead. I mean, for let's say somebody with not that many resources, to what extent they can go, right?
Uh, so it is capital intensive, and it is see your non-recurring costs are going to be high upfront, in the sense that you need to have some sort of manufacturing base aligned. In the sense, let's say if you're, again, it depends on your product, but let's say it's a medium complexity product. You need to have some sort of lab facility to actually build the product, test the product, proof of concepting. All that needs some. So if you're building an electronics product, you need your basic toolkits to help do that. So what I would advise most hardware entrepreneurs right now is try to associate yourself with a research group or a research lab, or an incubator who already has a space like this available. So most, so there will, so if you are looking at Bangalore, there are like I forgot that I think it was Reva, or I forgot the incubator. So there are
Revex, right?
Revex.
Right.
So there are few hardware specific incubators which are there, who would have one experienced mentorship group and all that is there, but they would already have a fab lab facility. Even if you come to our lab, so we have a entire full-fledged fab lab. So fab lab is fabrication laboratory, wherein you have all the tools under your disposal to make a proof of concept product. You don't need to leave that place. So you might need to buy small components from here and there, but the machinery is already built in place. Else you always need to outsource that to somebody to get that built in. So even if that means that you have to shell away some amount of equity for your initial stage, that will help you down the line as well, is what I would say. So in order to mitigate your not, so if you don't have enough of your capital upfront, that is okay. You try to join an incubator where there is a fab lab facility, or try to join a research group, or be in an incubator where there is a lab facility which is available for you to scale, to help you build through this. And
I see.
other one more quick point is, you try to land yourself a grant. This is, so if you're trying to see, uh, there are quite a lot of, so if you're specifically in medical domain, there are quite a lot of grants, like Indian and foreign, which you can potentially help to land, which can give you money from like 5 lakhs to 50 lakhs range. That will be your seed capital. This is no equity based capital, wherein you are free to prototype and create an idea to prototype, and that will stop at that juncture. At that point, you try to say, okay, do I have customers? Do I look into going to VC for that? And species might be too early, maybe an angel network or something of that order. So those are areas which you can look into.